Thursday, October 7th, 2021. Today on the Daily Review, we discuss a Jack Nicholson classic that we watched yesterday in the comic film class at Boston College. That's right. It's about Schmidt. Directed by Alexander Payne. With your host, me, Joe LaRocca. That's right, guys. It's every day, baby. It's every day. I left my notes in my car because I'm an idiot, but I took notes while we watched it in class. If you don't know, I teach a comedy class, comedy film class, I should say, one of the courses I teach. And right now we're dealing with what I call cerebral or intellectual comedies. And it's a bummer because kind of the king of this is Woody Allen to a certain degree with his, not that he's like a college-educated person. He doesn't need to be. But he, we don't need to talk about that. But I don't really like showing it. Last year I showed Albert Brooks. And what I consider cerebral or intellectual, this isn't like necessarily a textbook definition, but comedies where they're more adult-themed. They're way more about character. The plot itself might not actually be that comical of a situation on paper, but the way the characters deal with it is, and it's usually, you gotta think about it, it's not like tons of laugh out loud jokes. It's funny more in like that's funny. That makes them sound not good, but it's definitely a different tone, and I'm using this to contrast what we're doing in a couple weeks, which is like gross out humor, which is people like having sex with pies and stuff like that. So just want to show that there is another direction to go, where you can make more thought-provoking comedies. And I like both, man. I like the dumb ones. I like the smart ones. I like the smart ones that have dumb stuff in them, like Wet Hot American Summer or something like that. That's a smart movie that's, on its face value, is very dumb. Anyway, About Schmidt is Alexander Payne. He did Election and Sideways. And it's about a newly retired assistant vice president to an insurance company in Oklahoma, Nebraska. And he retires at the age of 66. His daughter lives in Denver, and she's about to get married. And he's wondering, what value does his life have if the monetary stuff doesn't end up mattering very much, which he is told at his retirement party, and that none of the superficialities matter. All that matters is your friends and your family and the knowledge that you had a productive job and did good work, and that can carry you to the grave. And you can see the look on his face is like, oh shit. Perhaps my job at Woodman of the World Insurance Company wasn't particularly valuable. And I don't really get along well with my wife. And my daughter is about to marry this guy that I hate. So, like, maybe I have failed massively. And that's where the comedy is coming from two spots. Him ignorantly not realizing how wrong he is the whole time. And Jack Nicholson playing off type, where he usually is the center of the scene. And in this, he's, like, meek and supplicant. Whereas he's usually like, ooh, wait till they get a load of me, where he's like, Whitey Bulger essentially, or something crazy. But in this, he plays it very toned down, and I think that's the coup of the film, as they say in France or wherever. So yeah, it's great. What he ends up doing, the first plot point, is his wife passes suddenly, and he has no idea what to do with himself. He can't even like make his own sandwich or take care of the house. Like, he is a piece of crap, and he doesn't realize it. He thinks he's from. That's what the point of the story is, like this generation that sees themselves as bulls. These big like kings of industry, and like they did what they were supposed to do, which is they had no emotional involvement with their family, but did 100% of their duties financially and protecting and taking care of, in that sense, of the family. And he is from that generation where you just work 35, 40 years at a job, and it doesn't matter necessarily accomplished anything, as long as you were providing for your family, maybe. And I'm not getting down on insurance, but insurance is like, come on, you're not really doing anything. You're not building anything or creating anything. And I'm not, I get it. We need insurance or whatever, but it's basically bullshit, Anyway, we'll leave that conversation to another time. But so then, yeah, he doesn't know what to do, but his wife bought an RV before she died. And he's like, I guess I'll go out and see my daughter. And she immediately is like, no, please don't. Please wait another 2 weeks, like we said, to the wedding. So he just kind of goes on a road trip, reliving some aspects of his life, going to his hometown, going to his college, visiting a bunch of different locations. And that's the whole second act, is his little journey, his little odyssey of realization, until he makes it to Colorado, where he has to meet the family, which the matriarch of the family is Kathy Bates. And she's very open-minded and artistic and sexual, and he is the complete opposite, right? Repressed and thinking only in his lane, And he learns a great deal from them. And the comedic situations really ramp up in that third act, because he is trapped in what we know he finds to be an incredibly uncomfortable situation. So to watch him kind of break down his nerves, and also, like I mentioned, the humor that in any other movie he wouldn't stand for any of this shit. You know what I mean? So just playing off of that a little bit. Anyway, I love this movie. I saw this movie in the theater with John, and we cried like babies, even though we were like, 17 or 18 years old, like crying at this adult movie in the theater, being like, Anyway, so it's funny. The students, had more of a mixed. Usually in this course, the movies I'm showing are like such ultimate classics that people are like, yeah, that's like the best movie I've ever seen. So this one, I knew it was going to be a little bit polarizing, because the type of comedy isn't really for anything. But two statements came up that I found was very, very interesting, and what I wanted to talk about. One, without saying names, obviously, I almost doxed the person. They were like, this movie's bullshit. This guy's, she didn't say it like that, or he, who knows. But essentially said, this character is despicable. Like, his whole life, he's just kind of a distant, shitty person. And then the whole movie, he like walks around like his story matters or whatever. And ultimately, he does nothing. He fails completely, and in the end, he thinks, I'm a hero because I'm like saving African children, like he thinks, that my $22 a month are doing something. And I was like, oh my goodness, if I watched this movie as like a 19 or 20-year-old woman who didn't necessarily have her whole lifetime spent with a different type of Jack Nicholson, Jack Nicholson. That too. But I was like, oh yeah, because the part of the filmmaking is that understanding that we know the kind of persona, the cinematic persona of Jack. And so I was like, which kind of carries is like the kind of the charisma that we go with. And I was like, oh, she's 100% right. Like about this, about that angle of seeing him as a piece of shit. But then I realized that added to the meaning of the movie, because I do think that he is redeemed at the end, and at the very least has a realization, and at the end now sees life a bit differently. And maybe it took 66 years for him to get to that point, for his internal life and his external life to be overlapping, like it is with Kathy Bates' character. And where she says what she thinks, whereas he says positive things to people and acts like how you're supposed to act in society, quote unquote, properly. But inside, he's very angry and scared and upset, and he lets that out through his letters to his friend Ndugu, a child that he is, quote unquote, adopted by sending $22 a month to Tanzania. So. So I totally saw that angle. I was like, yeah, if you don't see him as redeemed, then it's just this movie about like white privilege, basically. And that was the first thing I said, was like, it's interesting how you can now, the white privilege aspect is a big part of this movie. And in fact, a lot of more cerebral comedies or erudite comedies have to do with like very high class society type things, or money isn't usually the issue. Like in a Woody Allen movie, it's like not really ever the issue. They're always just like wealthy filmmakers or documentarians or authors or something. And in like, I showed a clip from Whit Stillman's Metropolitan, which is just like the most, I mean, it's taking to task though that elitist New York kind of Ivy League, whatever. But it's all like, all the jokes are like, you haven't watched enough you haven't read enough Jane Austen books to have a proper opinion. You know, it's like, oh my God, this is only for the smartest, the quote-unquote smartest people, the most well-read people. That being said, I think Dumb and Dumber is maybe the smartest comedy ever made. Well, that's not true. But this one's tremendous. So that was the one point that somebody brought up that made me look at the movie differently, and I thought was a totally valid opinion. And then one student was just like, how is this a comedy? And this student was laughing throughout the movie. He was like, I see it as like a drama with some comedy in it. And I was like, no, that is a really good point. And maybe it is. Maybe that was kind of a personal choice that I just liked this movie and wanted to squeeze it in. But ultimately, it had me ask the question of like, you know, there's comedy and tragedy. And usually, I mean, he ends up way better off, although he's lost everything at the end of this movie. And that's why, in the tone in which they deal with it, I feel is comedic, even though there are many dark, sad themes going on. But I guess you could argue it as a drama, because not all dramas are tragedies. But and certainly what sets the story off is a death, which could easily be seen as a tragedy. But I think the outcome of the movie is certainly not a tragedy, but it's uplifting, I think, at least the way I take it. I don't know. What do you guys think who've seen this movie? Do you find it uplifting or just depressing? You know, I remember I showed it to my dad like soon after he retired, and he was like, that was dark. You know, like the performance was just like, oh, geez. And I was like, oh, I hope he doesn't think that I was trying to like be like, this is you. Get an RV. Start driving around. But yeah, it's great because his motive is to like stop his daughter's wedding because he doesn't like the guy. And so much of the comedy comes from Dermot Mulroney's performance, which is amazing. But anyway, I highly recommend it. I'm not sure what it's on. I will check and put it in the bottom thingies. All right, I'm going to do a little bit of music. Controversial review yesterday, huh? Dave Chappelle, man, he brings the people out of the woodwork, which is good. All right, let's do some music.
Swimming in roses, God of heaven, there's nothing like nature, the wild mountains and the sea and the waves rushing, then the beautiful country with fields of oats and wheat and all kinds of things, and all the fine cattle going about that would do your heart good to see rivers and lakes and flowers, all sorts of shapes and smells and colors springing up even out of the ditches, primroses and violets. Nature, it is as for them saying there's no God, I wouldn't give a snap of my two fingers for all their learning. Why don't they go and create something? I often ask them, atheists or whatever they call themselves, go and wash the couples off themselves first, then they go howling for the priest, and they
Oof. They can't all be gems. All right. Talk to you tomorrow. And I want you guys to remember, the Native Americans, they got a raw deal. Just a raw deal. Also, check out the cow imagery in this movie. Beautiful. Steerage, baby. Steerage. Drainage, Eli! I drink your milkshake! I don't know where that came from, but it's always warranted, right?